Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. Tonight, I got a good one for you. We're going to be talking about aliens, along with, because it's October, and we're going to do all kinds of things that you may think are scary. And so we're gonna round up some alien visitors for you to, because I think that's a scary thing, or well, maybe not so scary, but it is one of those things that could fit in. You could dress up as an alien for Halloween, you know. Anyway, who wouldn't want to do that? So we're gonna have some screen shares and things like that as I read a wonderful story. We're gonna do this from a book. This is Wondrous, 25 True UFO Encounters by Preston Dennett. Now remember, Preston Dennett was on our show here many episodes ago, and you can go back and look at that. I can leave a link in the description below, and you can check that out if you want. So there you go. But anyway, he writes great books on UFO encounters too. We had him for astral projection and astral travel he did. But we're going to do walking through, we're going to do UFO encounters today. And the first one we got is it walked upright, you know. So anyway, we're going to check these things out. And there we go. UFOs and aliens. It walked upright. Sounds scary already. At 4:30 a.m. in mid-November 2006, Eleanor was ready for her morning run. She lived in a rural area of O'Fallon, Illinois. It is a neighborhood subdivision intermingled with cornfields and swaths of forest. It was a pretty location with lots of greenery. About 10 miles to the southeast was Scott Air Force Base. Eleanor was a school teacher and daycare worker in her mid-30s with 5 children. To keep fit, she often took early morning jogs along with her dog. It was a routine she had come to enjoy. On this particular morning, events began as normal. She and her dog left for home, jogged down the streets, turned into Illinois Drive, and headed north. She was passing Fulton Junior High on her left, and on her right side was a cornfield that had recently been plowed over. Illinois Drive ended just ahead of her at the T intersection onto Kyle Road. Eleanor was about 200 feet from the intersection. She was illuminated by streetlights on either side. Suddenly, as Eleanor said, my dog became alert. She slowed her pace, lifted her head and ears, and locked her sights onto something ahead. I casually looked up, expecting to see an animal. It was normally to come across as a deer, a coyote, or a fox, or occasionally other pedestrians. In the road ahead was something I couldn't make sense of. I slowly came to a stop, and I tried to figure out what I was looking at. I was walking adjacent to a streetlight. It was almost as tall as a streetlight and moving to the right. It was dark and gray and walked upright. My first thought was that someone was in the costume doing some kind of acrobatics on stilts with extensions of their arms. As I watched, I could tell that it moved with ease. What could that be? It moved with ease and attention, and no one could make stilts bend at the knees and the elbows. It was long and thin and had looked like it had points for hands. I was thinking grasshopper at first because of the jointed legs and the tips of the appendages, and it appeared to have a kind of exoskeleton. The creature was very dark gray, not quite black. It seemed to be all one color. I decided later that it was more praying mantis-like. Its incredibly long legs were taking massive strides, as its arms were held up forward and bent at the elbows, with the forearms and hands moving up and down in a pumping motion. The profile of the head seemed almost rectangular, but wider at the top and narrowing where it connected to the body, and its gaze swept from side to side, almost like it was looking for something on the ground. Each stride was approximately 6 or 7 feet. It covered a lot of ground in only a few steps. It seemed unhurried and focused. It did not seem to be worried about being spotted. I did not see any clothing. It looked exactly like an upright walking praying mantis, with more insect qualities to it than human. So I stopped where I was and watched what I was seeing. I was just walking down the road and realized it was a real and solid creature, living, and as it walked, its legs lifted up and would reach and stretch over very long strides. It was long, dark, and skinny, and as it was striding, its arms were moving in a pumping motion above its head. Eleanor had never seen a UFO, and aliens were the farthest thing from her mind. Now, seeing this figure, she struggled to orientate herself. My mind was whirling with and trying to decide what to do. I really thought about turning back and racing for home, but for some reason, I was more compelled to get a closer look. It had not seemed to be aware of me, and I was continuing its movement down the road, heading closer to the wooded and darkened section. I slowly started running forward and never took my eyes off the creature. My dog was very alert and also watching, but she did not pull on the leash or bark. By the time I got to the corner, it moved far enough into the darkness I could no longer see it. I knew better than to follow it into the darkness, and I turned left onto a normal route. I kept up my eyes wide open for the rest of my run, and every run after that, I've never seen it again. While the experience didn't really scare her, Eleanor admits that it did leave her with a lot of questions. I went back to that area later in the day during the daylight, she says. I stood under the streetlight. I'm 5'5", and the streetlight was at least 3 times my height. So I know that the being was close to 15 feet tall. I have never given much thought to aliens until this time, and it still has taken me years to conclude that it was likely some kind of an interdimensional being. I compulsively wonder why I saw this. Why would it let me see it? Was it a mistake? What am I supposed to do about it? Sometimes I wish I never saw it, but at the same time, I now have the awareness that there is something more. She told her husband and her 5 children, her sister and a few close friends, all who believed her and supported her. She still went jogging the next morning, keeping a sharp eye out for anything unusual. Although she looked for it, Eleanor never saw the creature again. Eleanor later learned that only a few weeks before she saw the praying mantis figure, there had been another dramatic encounter. About 325 miles away at Chicago's O'Hare Airport, could there be a connection? She wasn't sure. She was also so surprised to see such a creature so close to Scott Air Force Base. The proximity to the base is highly suspect, she says. Could the sighting be connected to the military? Only 6 years earlier, police officers in the adjacent cities of LeBaron, Shiloh, Millstadt, and Dupont tracked a UFO as it skirted the base. Officials at Scott denied any knowledge of the event. As a result of her encounter, Eleanor began to research the UFO subject, and she was shocked to read about experiences that sounded strikingly similar to some weird events which had happened in her childhood. Starting when she was about 4 years old, Eleanor would wake up in the middle of the night to see black hooded, cloaked figures standing in the hallway outside of her room. The first few times it happened, she screamed for her parents. On each occasion, her parents rushed into her room and tried to comfort her. They did not see any strange creatures and told her that she must have had a nightmare. Still, it keep it kept happening, and finally Eleanor's father forbade her from waking them up anymore. Eleanor never remembered the figures entering into her room. However, around the time she had bizarre experiences which she always thought was just a nightmare. In in the nightmare, Eleanor says, I woke up on a metal bed with a sheet pulled over my face. I could hear what I thought were doctors discussing a very serious medical procedure. I could see shadowy figures moving around through the sheet, but I could not move. I felt nervous, but was wondering who was getting an operation and what might be going on. As I lay there, someone began to lift the sheet off of me. There were doctors standing around my body with trays of medical surgical tools. The doctors seemed to be wearing something like surgical gowns. I could not see their faces. I was fully engulfed in the deepest terror, knowing that they were going to fix me. I don't know what happened next. I woke up and it was morning. The nightmares were incredibly vivid, and apparently, as a result, Eleanor developed a crippling phobia of the sound of rushing water. Something of her mother found extremely irritating when trying to give Eleanor a bath. Eleanor was also developed a sudden fear of being alone. Thankfully, both phobias eventually faded away. The strange hooded figures stopped coming, and Eleanor had no further nightmares. However, there were some other strange experiences. In 1986, she was a senior at the high school in Elk Grove, California. One morning, she was going to attend a school field trip. A friend was driving. Eleanor was in the front passenger seat, and a young preschool-aged child sat in the back. Eleanor was gazing out the passenger window when she heard the child sitting behind her gasp. At the moment, a car was pulling up next to them. Eleanor looked at the driver of the car and also gasped. The driver did not appear to be human. I was pretty shocked to see the profile of an elongated oval-shaped head, Eleanor said. It was smooth and minimal profile features. The color was extremely pale and had a corpse looking like, or looked like, corpse looking like it to it. There were just a few sprinkles of hair coming from its head, and suddenly, as I could take this in, his head slowly turned and made eye contact with me. The eyes were dark and sunken pools of black. I jerked my head away and said nothing. The strange encounter left her shaken, particularly because the way the man turned to look at her. At the time, she wondered if he might be some kind of demon. Strange experiences like this continued to plague her throughout her life. In 2011, another 5 years after the sighting of the praying mantis on Kyle Road, Eleanor had another strange encounter in nearly the exact same spot. Again, she was taking a very early morning jog with her dog. Her other dog, who had seen the ET with her, had since died, and this was a different dog. As she did each morning, she jogged north up Illen Drive, then turned left onto Kyle Road. The Fulton Junior High School was still on her left, and on her right was a field that was being dug up to construct a massive water tower. Again, it was her dog who noticed something strange. My dog became excited about something ahead as we passed this construction area, Eleanor says. Again, assuming it was a critter or another person, I looked up, and about 25 feet or so ahead of me there was something crawling from the field with the hole and beginning to cross the road. It was not unusual for fog to accumulate in the field, so I was used to seeing mysterious-looking streams of fog streaming into the road. This was a concentrated ball of illuminated mist. It was distinctly round and compact, and seemed to be illuminated somehow. It was about 3 feet tall and had entrails of mist that looked like octopus legs rotating up and over and from behind the ball. and moving itself forward in a rolling motion. My dog was excitedly pulling me forward, and even though I was insanely weird, I did not feel scared of it and hurried to get closer. As it moved up the grassy area to the schoolyard, it began to slowly fade and had vanished by that time. I had gotten close. The weird experiences continued. 1 year later, in the summer of 2012, Eleanor went outside to enjoy the fireflies dancing in the twilight. Instead, she saw something strange hovering over her. Hovering over her neighbor's deck. I looked over to see what a basketball-sized illuminated ball swirling with rainbow colors, Eleanor says. The object reminded her of an outdoors solar gazing ball, but there was something strange. I could not see the anything holding it in place. It did not move up or down or side to side. No light emanated out of it. It was pretty mesmerizing, trying to figure out, and I moved around my yard to look from different angles. Convinced it was unusual, she called out to her daughter. "What do you see?" she asked. "A colored ball," her daughter replied. Both of them were mystified and watched it for about 20 minutes. Then they wondered if it was a new type of light her neighbor had purchased. Finally, they went back inside. Eleanor decided to ask her neighbor the next time she saw her. The next night, the glowing ball of light was gone. Eleanor never saw it again. A few days later, her neighbor called by coincidence, and Eleanor asked her about the strange orb of light. After I described it, Eleanor says she started to get a little freaked out since she hadn't been home that night, and there is no possible way she owned anything that resembled it. She went outside while we were on the phone and looked everywhere in her yard and couldn't find a thing. In 2014, Eleanor had another strange encounter and strange entity, very much like what she saw almost 30 years earlier as a senior in high school on this occasion. It was nearly morning, and she was waiting for the local Sam's Club store to open. Ahead of her, in line, was very surprised to see a strange-looking woman. Her head was oblong, pale, and molted with veins. Eleanor says she had a few spriggles of hair. I wasn't really thinking, but it was slowly turning around. She made eye contact with me, and she had dark pools of blackness for eyes. I jerked my head away, and I felt ashamed for inadvertently staring. The store doors opened, and I looked back just a moment after the eye contact, and she wasn't there. It all seemed that she had vanished. Eleanor was again left shaken. What a demonic spirit could it be? Or have been an extraterrestrial? She isn't sure. I really don't know what to think about it, she says. In 2015, Eleanor moved away from O'Fallon. Shortly before moving, they invited their neighbors, an elderly retired couple, over for dinner. The husband was a retired Air Force officer who had worked on nearby Scott Air Force Base. Normally, Eleanor doesn't talk publicly about her 2006 sighting of the 15-foot tall praying mantis. To her own surprise, she found herself describing not only her praying mantis sighting, but also the fog-like creature. The retired Air Force officer and his wife seemed to hesitate. They sat in quiet silence, and I regretted my mistake, Eleanor says. When I finished, they were quiet. After a few moments, he told me he didn't believe in that kind of stuff, seemingly hesitant. He proceeded to tell me that they had worked with a guy at Scott that had lived somewhere along Kyle Road who told him that weird things happened over on Kyle Road. I knew he didn't mean weird stuff like corpses and cops and robbers or sort of thing. By the way, he said, if I asked if he could tell me exactly what, and he said no. Today, Eleanor is happy with her weird life and accepts her unusual experiences with an attitude of curiosity. All of the experiences, it was an encounter with a praying mantis, which affected her most. As she says, it was 15-foot tall praying mantis man striding down the city street early one morning while I was out for my run. It was definitely changed my life and my perception about the existence here and in other places. Very interesting. Have you seen an alien? Have you seen a giant praying mantis? Wow, you never know. You could have, or you might, and you still could. If you're living and breathing, maybe you will be the next one. So, with that, go out, check things out. Keep your eyes peeled because you never know what you're going to see right in front of you. And besides that, go check out this book, Wondrous 25 Stories of Wondrous UFOs. It's a great thing to read during Halloween. Now remember, go out and be the frequency you want to receive, everyone. I love y'all. Peace, everybody.